brother, I know it's not healthy, but you just got to preach the word and eat the bird.
It's a word and eat the
And it's
bird.
like, it makes me think that, when everybody's being picky at the potluck dinner about the thing, just shut up and eat the bird. Welcome back to Reason Together, the podcast for Christians who think about stuff. I'm Thomas, here as always with Daniel.
And good morning, or whatever time it is that you're listening to this. I'm doing well. Thank you. No, I know. Man. I'll be the old fogey here and say the weather is nice. I have to comment on the weather because I can't comment on the gas prices. I like this 50 to 70 range. That to me is that's great right there. Sweatshirt weather, can work and kind of be warm enough, but not be like wringing wet with sweat and stuff like that.
Yep, I like it too. Nice. We had to turn on the heat for the first time this season.
Yes,
this morning. So we're that time of year again.
Yes, we are. And those of you listening to us, we don't know where you're listening to us from. Maybe you're in some tropical climate somewhere and you enjoy it, and that's great. Hey, fine. Thanks for tuning in. And we want to thank our patrons over at patreon.com/reasontogether who have committed to support us on an episode-by-episode basis. I sure appreciate all that you invest in this venture here.
Yes, we are grateful to you for that. And also, as a preliminary thing here, if you are listening and you have enjoyed listening to Reason Together, if you would do us a quick favor and go over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review if you think we've earned that. And that certainly helps us get before more ears and helps the message of reasoning together through our faith and practice out to a broader audience. So if you would please feel free to go over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a review and a rating, we would be grateful.
We have a few different things to talk about today. We'll see what kind of time we've got. But we always, in fact, today, if we've got time, we have 3 different listener feedbacks here to deal with, I believe. And we'd love to hear from you. So if you've got a thought either on what we're talking about or a question that just comes to mind, it may seem like an insignificant or an odd question and really turn out once we throw it out there and bat it around to be something pretty significant. So, feel free to just quick get into your email there, reasontogetherpodcast@gmail.com. Drop us a line. Let us know what you're thinking, and we'd look forward to seeing it.
Yeah. Well, as for this list of questions here, my
yes, I do.
My penchant for wanting to deal with these don't peak ones first. But yet we have listener feedbacks. Do you have a preference here?
Yes, I would probably hit the feedback first. Yep.
Okay. All right. Let's go with the feedback first. Let's do this picky eater one first. I think we recently talked about. This was your question, actually. I think that you had asked.
Yeah, somebody had asked me. I think about is being a picky eater a bad testimony? Poor testimony.
Yeah. And I think we had concluded that yes, it certainly can be. Doesn't mean you can never have allergies or certain restrictions that you place on yourself.
Right.
But yeah, anyway, this is from one of our patrons, from Omar. He says, as far as picky eaters, I think there's a difference between kids who have a few things they don't prefer to eat and a kid who has a whole list of common foods that they refuse to eat.
I like this example.
For example, here's the example he gives. Johnny will only eat spaghetti without meatballs, and you have to cut his sandwiches diagonally. And if you put so much milk in his Lucky Charms that the marshmallows float, he won't eat them. And he doesn't eat anything green, etc.
And on and on.
Yeah, and on it goes. To me, it seems this is allowing a dangerous level of autonomy to a child who is not yet old enough to make those decisions for himself. I would say that if this kind of pickiness or personal food preferences, except for actual food allergies, gets in the way of fellowship with fellow believers, then it has crossed a line that spiritually it has no right to cross. I know that some churches are discontinuing potluck meals because of the division caused by, quote, non-GMO, locally sourced, gluten-free, organic, vegan, etc., end quote. That's sad.
Wow,
And that is from Omar.
That's interesting. I go, wow, to think about that a potluck meal at a church, that there's that many restrictions on it that people won't even get together and eat. Then okay.
I have not heard of this. I have not heard of
I have
this,
to say,
but he says he's heard of this happening.
Yeah, kudos to Our Ladies. I feel like there are some that deal with maybe a gluten-free or something like that, and they'll actually make dishes and bring it and then put a little sign in it, that says gluten-free. So the ladies who don't eat that, okay, I can take, I can take that. And so it's not restricting them. It's actually providing those people an alternative and showing, look, we can help each other here, or whatever. And I like that. But wow, when you get pretty, wow.
Right. Yeah, I was at a church one time up in Maine, and the pastor is kind of a funny guy, and they had a potluck dinner after the service, like a luncheon thing, and there was fried chicken there. And he was just raving about the fried chicken, and he said, "Brother, I know it's not healthy, but you just got to preach the word and eat the bird."
It's a word. And
it's like, it makes me think that, when everybody's being picky at the potluck dinner about the thing, just shut up and eat the bird.
I think his statement here, I like the way he expresses it when he says, it seems this is allowing a dangerous level of autonomy to a child who is not yet old enough to make those decisions for himself. That idea of autonomy to say, well, whatever you want, we'll tailor the home around you. No, you're in orbit in this home. You're not the nucleus. Everything doesn't revolve around you. And, you're just going to, I'm sorry, bud, you're going to have to learn to eat some, mushy Lucky Charms here or whatever, because things aren't flexing like that. And we've got to get over that. And
you're eating your sandwich with the crust on.
Yeah. You eat that crust. So I'm sure we've all seen stuff like that, a kid that doesn't like one thing or the other, but to let that actually rule over, or greatly infringe on this, kind of fellowship, or just a family dynamic, or moms having to make, a specific meal or guide around that.
Right.
Now, I have heard, I think about this one situation, I have heard of a missionary lady who said in this particular country they were in, they would always they regularly use this spice that was spicy, as very hot. And of course, that would be a level of discomfort to eat very hot foods if you're not used to that. So she actually, would slowly started putting it into their food and training the kids to eat it. So they got used to that spice, well, good for her. She's actually acclimating them to that hot spice, not just saying, well, forever, we can't ever eat their local food, just because we just can't do that.
Right. Yeah, that's better than just, suffering through it in one go and saying, okay, kid, tough it out, at least inoculate them to it a little bit. That's a good thing. I think the alternative that Omar is describing here, the example he gives, is just kind of one step away from the kid learning that they have the right to make demands.
Because essentially it's what they're doing. Their want is their demand.
That is essentially what they're doing. And kids are not stupid. They realize certain things are transferable from one category to the next. And if they can make demands with their food, then what else are they going to start making demands with? And then you have to tell the child they don't have the right to make demands. And then they think, well, you let me do that with my food, and so on. So you end up with this whole, ugly mix up where it's not clear that there's an authority figure.
Which, that could lead into a much broader discussion, about just general child rearing and the dynamic of the home.
Sure.
Yeah. And just that idea of authority, and a child recognizing, where do I fit in this family? What is my role? And for children to understand that concept of submission, especially, obviously it kicks in when, I don't like this. I don't agree that I should eat this because I don't like it. But anyway, so interesting discussion. And Omar, thanks for the feedback on that.
Yeah, thank you, Omar. And he's got another one here.
Yeah, also gives us a feedback on the spiritual gifts. Now, he says, this was our episode with Ethan, where Ethan invited
Correct.
himself back. And I don't say that
Yes.
with any disappointment. We enjoyed the conversation and
Yes.
appreciate Ethan. But he says, you all discussed Moses' spiritual gifts, but aren't all of the Bible's teachings on spiritual gifts specifically within the context of the church and enabled by the indwelling of the Holy Spirit? Would you see some kind of would you see some kind of continuity between Israel and the church in relation to the gifts of the Spirit? Okay, I'm gonna confess something here.
Yeah.
I do not have a good memory. I don't feel like, it's almost worrisome. But as far as what we discussed in that episode, I do not have any recollection of mentioning Moses. In fact, I don't remember probably most of the conversation. So
Yeah, I think it was me.
okay, I enjoy the conversations as we go along, but I was like, I don't think I even mentioned I don't know, whatever, or whatever. It's just like, so what's your take on it? You answer the question.
Sure. It was me, I believe, that mentioned it. And we talked about Moses' temperament being that he struggled with anger at times, it seemed. He was angry with the children of Israel. Okay. He lost his temper. He killed the Egyptian and so on. But yet the same quality can be a good quality in leadership if, aggressiveness, we might say, if that is under the control of the Holy Spirit. And he asked, do we see continuity between Israel and the church? The answer to that is theologically no. I see no continuity between Israel and the church. They are separate institutions. What I do see a continuity between, and I think this is what our point was in the original episode, is continuity between spiritual gifts and personality. There is a correlation, it seems, oftentimes, between someone's gift that they have and their personality. And we've tried to flesh out before what that relationship is, and we've never really been able to fully delineate the exact nuance.
Yeah. I mean, so you're saying
what that is.
You're saying that we thought that they were consistent, and yet they are distinct. One's personality is distinct from the spiritual gift, and
Correct.
for no other reason that a spiritual gift is given, assumedly at the time of salvation, and he obviously had a personality prior to that.
Sure, right. And if you could take Moses and theoretically transport him forward in time into the New Testament church, I think the man would be a preacher. He would be a leader. He would be an administrator in a church of some kind. He wouldn't simply be a passive man. And the Lord would use him in a capacity of leadership in the New Testament church if you could move him there. That's my speculation. Obviously, we can't know that. But no, I don't see continuity between Israel and the church in that sense related to spiritual gifts. And honestly, I don't know that I fully see a continuity between the ministry of the Holy Spirit in the Old Testament and in the New Testament. He does certainly seem to have done things differently in the Old Testament versus the New. For instance, in the Old Testament, he would come upon people at times and move people and so on. Whereas in the New Testament, you see this filling and this indwelling that takes place that seems decidedly different. The continuity we're seeing is between personality and spiritual gifts, whatever that continuity might be. We don't know.
Okay. All right. So there you go. Answer to that. Now, I don't mind if we throw in one of our the don't peaks here before our next feedback.
Okay.
And I'm going to ask this one. And I know this seems like an odd question, but so let me give you a context on it. But my question basically is this: should we ever publicly disrespect someone? And you're like, on its face, you're like, no. But I mean, My thought is, aren't there certain, I mean, we offer some customarily respectful treatment to people, i.e., you walk up and you smile and you shake their hand, right? And that's, it's a means of respecting them. But in different circumstances of life or different, avenues, is there ever a time when you wouldn't shake someone's hand because you're basically trying to say, no, I don't respect that position? What's that?
That is so creepy. I was just like, I'm telling you with God as my witness, I did not look at your question. It says, don't peek. I didn't peek. But I was just thinking about this yesterday, because a couple weeks ago, I ran into someone who does not have a good standing with churches. Right. They don't believe in church membership. They're kind of a floater. They're very much kind of posers and they've rejected the authority of the scriptures. They've been counseled with scripture, and the answer that was received was, "I don't care." So they've got a pretty dubious relationship with scriptural authority. And I ran into this person recently, and just instinctively, and to avoid any awkwardness, they when they put out their hand, I shook their hand.
Sure.
But yet inside, I hated doing that. And I thought yesterday, what if I ran into this other person who has kind of a similar problem? Would I shake their hand too? And I was actually thinking about, is it ever appropriate in this culture to refuse the hand because you don't really respect someone's standing?
Yeah, or their overall character or their doctrine or thing. Like, for instance, say in the political realm, if I were the president, and I had this meeting with the bully of, the president of the bully of Asia, China, and okay, do you extend the hand and shake it and say, like, hey, and respect him in that way? Or do you think, no, I'm in complete opposition to you because you're an enemy of our country. You're pro killing of children. You're a very immoral man on, I'd say on different levels. I don't respect you. I don't recognize, you know what I'm saying? I don't respect you. I stand totally opposed to you in different ways. So then do you just not shake the hand? Now, I'm sure that maybe there's different thoughts on, oh my goodness, you'd spark outrage in the country and start a war and blah, 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 blah. Okay. But I mean, could it be biblically legitimate to not show kindness or deference in that way? Or let's say let's say we're at an airport, right? And you're in line, or you happen to see Joel Osteen or something, some guy like that, and he smiles at you, says, "Hey, do you put your hand out and say, hey, how you doing, Joel?" You know what I mean? You just, man, can we get a selfie? Do you say, no, I don't agree with you or your direction or your doctrine or your whatever, and I'm just picking the name. There could be others, but I'm just saying, somebody that you say, or maybe it's even somebody who calls himself, and I don't necessarily have a name in mind here, but I'm just saying, maybe it's somebody that's closer to home, like a hyper authoritarian, caustic, supposedly fundamentalist leader that you feel like it has been very damaging to churches and hurtful to people. And then you meet them. Do you just treat them like, hey, yeah, you're one of us, just you shake his hand and be kind and be sweet and act like, it's kind of disregard any disagreements you might have? Or do you just kind of treat him coolly, don't extend the hand, and let him walk away thinking, I don't think that guy really likes me? What's your take on that? Because I'll throw in something else in a minute.
As for the morality of it, I'm struggling to think of a biblical example. The closest I can think of right now, but I don't think it's completely analogous, is Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and Daniel. For instance, they refused to bow, but that again was an issue of overt idolatry, which obviously they were going to refuse that. But then Daniel refusing the portion of the king's meat, that I suppose could have been, in a sense, a disrespectful move, depending on the culture. But again, I don't think that's a great example either. So I'm struggling to find a biblical example to justify the morality of openly disrespecting someone. But I can't say that my conscience has a problem with it.
Yeah. Can
I can't say that my conscience does.
Can I offer maybe a little comparison with that? Another line of questioning here, but when they refused the king's meat, essentially, or had purposed in his heart that he would not eat of this meat, and yet there is something that he did appeal. He did appeal to the authority in an appropriate way, so he was not disrespectful in that way. And of course, Nebuchadnezzar would have been a pagan, immoral man of sorts. So am I advocating that Daniel, just walk up and not shake his hand and not treat him friendly? No. I guess I'm not saying in a sense where you are essentially a slave to somebody and you shouldn't treat them with respect. I think there's scriptural teaching that way, that of course you obey them, and you serve them as, you work as unto the Lord and things like that. But in an environment where we're on an equal plane, that we're both free American citizens, we can think what we want to think. I don't owe you, or I don't serve you in that way. Should I always be serving? Do I always owe people respect? What if he is, what if it is a wicked, dirty person, or what if he's a harmful person? Does showing respect somehow communicate or lessen his grievance, or communicate to other people that I'm okay with it?
Yeah, I think it can. The other example that comes to mind, perhaps in the New Testament, is when in Galatians chapter 2, when they're at this meal and Paul withstands Peter to the face because he was to be blamed for dissimulation, or dissembling is the word that's there, I believe. But again, was that public disrespect? I don't know. That's why I guess the question is, what do you mean by disrespect? Because if simply disagreeing with someone and showing your disagreement in a public way, if that's disrespect, I'm okay with it.
Yeah, well, and that's a good point. I had to think over my definition there. I guess I do mean disrespect in the sense that, to not offer someone the hand, and by that, in our American culture, the shaking of the hand is to say, I don't think you're worthy of a handshake, and thus it is to detract from their perceived value, which is disrespect. But what you're saying, I wonder if an alternative to that is kindness with frankness, is being totally open with people and not being ashamed at all to disagree with them, and just being, being kind to people, but not backing an inch from what you believe. And when they say something, you just kindly say, "Oh, brother, you and I don't agree on that. I think you're, way off the deep end on that. Here's where I stand, where I solidly stand." And so there's a disagreement, but yet there's still kindness.
Yeah, and I guess that's maybe a different phase of the discussion, because now you're dealing with what happens next. If I think I'm going to have the opportunity to have a conversation, if I think that this is someone I can potentially influence in the right direction, then maybe openly disrespecting them at the outset might not be a great way to start. So I guess that's kind of a different phase of the discussion is what do I presume is going to happen next after I meet this person? Am I going to have a conversation, or is this just going to be, a meet and greet and then I walk on? Am I in like some sort of receiving line or something where they're shaking everybody's hand and they get to me and I go, no, thanks, and they just keep walking. You know what I'm saying?
So yeah, I'm thinking through that. What you just said, a meet and greet. I was thinking of like a receiving line. No, that's not what you're talking about. Okay, a meet and greet. You're just milling around with a bunch of guys, and you can either meet the guy or not meet the guy, and you just sort of avoid him.
Yeah. Well, I guess what I'm saying is, if I think I'm going to have the opportunity to actually have a conversation, then refusing the hand at the outset or some other form of overt disrespect may not be the best start. If that makes sense, because it's already put them on defensive ground when it comes to talking with me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
But if it's someone who's belligerent and there's just no talking with them at all, and I have no chance of a conversation with them, and so on, if they've already indicated in some sense that I have no influence over them, then yeah, I don't see a need to actually put out my hand and shake their hand. I can voice my disagreement with them, with a gesture like that, and then move on.
Good. And the one other, scriptural thought that comes to mind is, when someone's disciplined from the church and you treat them as a publican or whatever, what does that mean? Are you mean to them? Well, no. But what's the point of church discipline is to bring people back, to draw them back to repentance. And of course there should be some sense of separation and that you don't enjoy the fellowship that we once had, but not because we're mean, but because we are loving, and yet we're separated now. We can't fellowship in the way that we could before.
Yeah.
So I'm saying that doesn't, just as we would say, well, that doesn't require a meanness. It just requires a separation. And yet on the other hand, think about how Jesus, obviously he was very frank in his disapproval of the religious establishment. Would he have gone about and shook their hand? Well, that was maybe a cultural thing then, but I mean, he just pretty straight up, said that they were wrong. And then in their presence said, don't be like these guys because they're blind leaders of the blind.
Right.
So, I mean, that's where truth was very, there's frank, but there's another word I'm looking for. But anyway, truth was very evident, and it could be spoken very candidly. So maybe it doesn't just have to be like brought down. It's almost the flip side to me of sometimes handing out a tract. I should talk to the guy. It'd be nice to get into a conversation and to, or to try to plant a seed or put a stone in his shoe, as the phrase goes. Try to have some sort of conversation, but I minimize it to this one interaction with the tract. Be like, here, read this.
Right.
Like that's gonna, that relieves me of my obligation. Well, to flip that around, instead of saying I should be prepared with the defense of what I believe and what I disagree with and how to interact with this person, I simply, I'm going to get it all done with, I don't shake your hand. Well, maybe like you say, that's not the most effective means of demonstrating your disagreement.
Yeah. But do you think that would be in some senses warranted when someone has a strained or rebellious relationship to the things of God, or they're theologically in error and they've demonstrated that they're not willing to change their mind, like the guy I ran into, who left the church because he didn't agree with church membership, and didn't want to be accountable to any church. Would that have been appropriate to not shake his hand? Or should I be like some preachers, be the eternal optimist, where I need to always handle everyone sensitively in every transaction because they might, fingers crossed, they might come back?
Well, see, again, maybe it's honing it down to that actual action. Could you shake their hand and say, brother, I've sure missed you. And if he says, well, we don't listen, I could see even certain personalities going, now, brother, you and I both know that you didn't care, your wife didn't care for, blah, 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 blah. And just being very candid, it wasn't so much about the handshake. It's about, identifying the elephant in the room, and addressing where it is that we're crossways with each other. I wouldn't say that would necessarily have to be a not handshake thing. To me, there's still somebody that, it depends, I guess, in your mind. I would think maybe what is the level? If this guy's an apostate, like he is a false teacher, or he's someone who you feel like is in a leadership position who knows better. You should know truth, and you are misleading people because you want the name, you want the authority, you want the control. I don't really respect your position because you're just misusing authority in God's name, and that is tremendously reprehensible. I have no desire to be around you, and I don't have to act, super diplomatic and kind and winning necessarily. Versus somebody who, he's a sheep, he's wandering, he's rebellious at the moment, but is that worthy of a full on?
And an intentional heretic is worse than an ignorant heretic in some sense, even though they're both doing the same thing. Okay.
So, I don't know.
Listeners, if you have any thoughts about that,
please,
we'd like to hear them. reasontogetherpodcast@gmail.com.
And even some other scenarios, like what is a kind of person that you would approach that you would even question? Should I shake this guy's hand? And we bring it down to the shaking of the hand. Maybe it's something different in your mind. Maybe the showing of respect is a different action. You wouldn't invite them over, or you wouldn't, whatever. I don't know. But how do you kind of digest that question and answer that But is there ever a place to publicly or even personally just demonstrate to someone, I do not at all care for who you are and what you believe and what you do,
Yeah.
and not try to
Yeah.
make
I
errors
think
that
we answered that in the affirmative, that yes,
it seems
there
like,
is, there is a time and place for that.
yeah, finding that place might be a little difficult as far as landing on that exact spot, but
Sure.
all right, we have a little time. Why don't we deal with this this evangelism one, this feedback here?
Mm-hmm.
Get that? Okay.
Yes, let's do that. This is from another one of our patrons. This is from Justin. He says, "Here's a possible question for the podcast. Halloween falls on a Sunday this year. Imagine a setting where the church sits in the middle of a neighborhood that is a, quote, destination for trick-or-treaters. People drive from around the area to trick or treat there. Perhaps 1,000 children will come through the area of the church right during the time in which you would typically have your Sunday evening service. What is the biblical approach to how the church handles this? Some possible scenarios." And he gives 4 scenarios here. 1, see it as a great evangelism opportunity. Hand out candy and gospel tracts. Does this give the appearance of evil? 1 Thessalonians 5. Second option, hold your service and ignore what is going on outside. This may cause your congregation an extra half an hour trying to get to and from church and may lead to disruptions during the service. Does it make a point or come across as proud or holier than thou? Third option, hold your evening service some other time and avoid the gathering. Does this show that you are ashamed of the gospel? Romans 1:16. Or fourth option, instead of an evening service, hold some other type of event for the congregation, inviting others to come. I have seen harvest dinners and trunk or treat done in this manner. Of course, there are many, many other potential options. Even in my lifetime, Halloween has become significantly darker, with many more people celebrating the day with far more and much more deplorable lawn decorations, etc. How much does the Christian and the church engage with what is largely just a demonic celebration? Thanks for your time and keep up the good work, Justin. It's a good question.
Yeah, that's a great layout of the question, to put it in scenarios like this. Okay, here's 4 different ways you could handle that. What would that be? So he says, just to recap one more time, do you basically say, all right, we're making this an evangelistic opportunity, and in some ways we're skipping the service to hand out candy and tracts? Or
Right.
do you ignore it and go on like usual? Do you avoid the whole thing by just sort of rescheduling so you can still have your normal church service, but at a different time, so you're not dealing with the disruption? Or do you try to have a replacement or alternative activity for people where they're invited into your place to do essentially the same thing, and get candy, but it's in a sanctified environment?
Yeah.
All right. You want to answer
well, I
that?
suppose maybe as a preliminary discussion, and if we can just touch on this rather than spend a long time on it, why don't we celebrate Halloween?
Okay.
I was, this was sent to me, maybe a week ago now. And it floats around the internet, I believe, around this time of year, every year in Christian circles. And it is a quote from the founder of the Church of Satan. Maybe you've heard this before. His name is Anton LaVey, the founder of the Church of Satan. Yep. It says Anton LaVey himself declared that by dressing up, either by wearing a costume or by coloring oneself in celebration of Halloween, signifies that you allow Satan to own you. He further said that when you adopt the pagan practices, you subconsciously dedicate yourself to the devil. He took joy in Christians who take part in the tradition, saying, quote, I am glad that Christian parents let their children worship the devil at least one night out of the year. Welcome to Halloween, end quote. Here's my concern with this. I searched and searched and searched to try and find the original source of this quote. And I could not find it. And I found one source that claimed that he said this in an interview. And I could not find the interview. I could not find a publication in which there was a direct quote from the man saying this. All I could find is blog after blog after blog, almost verbatim, not just copying Anton LaVey's quote, but copying even the copy and the text around it. Like everyone's just ripping each other off with their blog posts, publishing this quote from Anton LaVey that I can't even source. I cannot find the original source of this quote. So my only concern, and just because I can't find it doesn't mean it can't be found, but my only concern is that this may be another one of these quotes where, Christians who are maybe kind of a little antagonistic, but at the same time gullible, are just sharing something around because it sounds, like this is the nail in the coffin. This is the one. This is the quote that'll just put to bed the entire argument about why Christians shouldn't celebrate Halloween. I'm just concerned that it may be fake. Is all. So if any of you listening know the original source of this quote and can find it verified that this man actually said this in one of his publications or in an interview that he gave, I would love to see it. Because it really is a profound statement if it's true that even the founder of the Church of Satan takes pleasure and delight in the idea that Christian parents would let their kids celebrate Halloween.
Yeah, and that's interesting that way. I do appreciate that you do your homework and try to verify those things before spreading them. I resonate with that. Now, even if the quote were true, and Anton LaVey said that if you put on a costume, you are subconsciously submitting to the devil, I don't agree with that. That just because he said it doesn't make it true. Part. However, no, like what you said, part. When he says, I'm glad that they, worship on Halloween, basically, I get that. You're right that goes, ooh, that lends some, some credence to the darkness of it. Now, that being said, it sounds like maybe I'm defending it here. For my personal, and I guess I have to, I think when it comes down to it, and at some point I have to say, there is obviously an autonomy of the believer to make the decision that he feels like he should, and there is people have a conscience, and I can't dictate that conscience. Though to me, it's pretty clear in my own conscience what to do about it, at least how to feel about Halloween. And so my personal take on Halloween is that it seems, here's, let me go to the rebuttal first. I'm just dressing up my kids because kids like to dress up in costumes and they like candy, and we're going to get candy. That's what probably that's all we're doing. We're going around getting candy. But to me, open your eyes to what Halloween is. I mean, just what is the culture? What is the sense of Halloween? Why are people putting caskets and spider webs and skeletons in their yard to celebrate this holy day? That's what holiday is. In fact, I just saw it now. Again, have I verified it? No, but my wife showed me on Facebook. There's a picture of a guy whose Halloween decorations were so gross that they actually called the police on him or something. We were talking like dead bodies with splatted blood and garbage bags with real looking bloody hands out of them or whatever. It's just it's beyond like, oh, that's a little tacky, or well, that's kind of crass. It's downright gross, and it speaks of death and and not just death, but horror. So the whole concept, so your kid's dressing like Captain America and going getting candy. All right. It doesn't necessarily match, but that's what but it's on this day that we're doing it.
Right. Well, you're making a better argument than I think some are with discussing the origins of Halloween, which are, again, not fully known. But regardless of that, the origins argument is not a great argument because, for instance, Christmas trees seem to have had a pagan origin, and celebrating Easter on the day that we do may have had a pagan origin. Right. So it's like, do we do away with those just because the origin of the celebration day was pagan and so on? So the origins argument isn't good. You're making the argument, I think, from like 2 Corinthians 6, What fellowship hath righteousness with unrighteousness? What communion hath light with darkness? What concord hath Christ with Belial? And so on. The celebration of Halloween is about death, and death is a result of the curse, and the curse is the result of sin. Halloween is the celebration of the results of sin. And whether or not the vast majority of Americans celebrate it with that in mind, dressing up as Captain America or whatever, a lot of them probably don't have death in mind and sin and the curse in mind. But those who celebrate Halloween in earnest, like as an actual holiday, there are people who are actually attempting communication with Satan, and they are doing demonic things, and they are worshiping Satan on that day. That is their Christmas. That is their Easter to them. And by giving credence to the day, you are, in a sense, trying to have fellowship with righteousness and unrighteousness and communion with light and darkness. And I think while you might be able to argue that you have some liberty to do it in a non-earnest way, I don't think it's wise to do.
Yeah, I mean,
So to go back to Justin's question, if a church is there and there are kids trick-or-treating around the area, I think it's going to have to be up to that church to decide how they practice this evangelistic opportunity. If they're out there in costumes passing out candy, that might be giving too much credence to the day. But if they're out there passing out tracts and they're not dressed in Halloween costumes, maybe they're not giving credence to the day in that behavior, and they're just taking advantage of the opportunity to pass out tracts. I don't see any problem with that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, right. I guess I was going. Yeah, I would. Maybe it's going a little too far to say, is there really even an evangelistic opportunity? I mean, obviously, I guess there's always sort of an evangelistic opportunity
Right.
that when I'm face to face with somebody, there's an evangelistic opportunity.
Yeah.
But in this way,
Depends on how optimistic you are.
But what happens, is, well, in order to evangelize, I have to relate with them. In order to relate with them, I have to take part to some degree in what they're doing. So thus, I've just in some sense scrubbed, what they're doing. And I've said, well, this is sort of okay because I'm going to sort of get down in the mud with you, and I'll give you candy while I'm giving you a tract, like, let's do some beach evangelism, and I'll get in my skimpy clothes and you get in your skimpy clothes, and I'll give you a tract, while we're doing it. Or I know,
Right.
I'll play some rock music in my front yard while, you walk by, so that, I kind of relate with you, but I'll give you a tract. Well, to me, it's kind of saying I'll be a part of that. And to me, I have pretty much no problem saying I want no part of that. And
Right.
I'm not going to look like I'm taking, and I think to know where you stand with it and have a justification, people say, well, why don't you do that? You're awful fuddy-duddy, and just say, and again, this kind of goes back to the other question, just, being kind, but having a candid response and saying, look, I understand people like candy, and I'd be glad to give your kid a candy bar in 2 weeks. You know what I'm saying? If you would come by my door sometime and say, hey, Pastor Fox, could I have a candy bar? Not that I'd give a candy bar to any neighbor would come by, but I mean, I'm saying, do I have any beef with giving your kid candy? No, not really. But I am in no way interested in being any part of this day that has to do with death and glory and the worst parts of the sinful human heart and mind. I have no desire. So for me, would I hold my service like usual and look holier than thou? Well, how it looks, I guess, is in the eye of the beholder. But yeah, I would go on with church to say, this is what we do, and this is where we are. You guys know this. We're here, 52 weeks out of the year. And it's not, it's not any revelation to them that we meet for church. So to have to plan my church meeting around what you do, no, I mean, we're just going to go to church. Now, on the way in, we'll smile and we'll say, hi, how are you? Oh, whatever. Might even say, that looks cute, or something. I don't know if I'd want to say that, but, just say, hey, how you guys doing? And I'd smile and I'd walk in. But I don't have to be like crusty and angry and mean and pushing kids out of the way. So that's kind of my take. And the whole now, and again, I'm not necessarily castigating a pastor who maybe hasn't thought through it in the same way. I'm not going to say he hasn't thought through it, but the trunk or treat thing, I'm just like,
No.
again, it's a replacement. It's like, well, let's have a Christian Halloween. Well, hey, let's not. Let's just have a fall party in about 3 weeks. You know what I'm saying? Or let's do our
Right.
own
What
thing on
about
our own day
what about harvest festivals?
on the day of Halloween.
Yeah, I've heard of them being on the day of Halloween
Yeah.
or fall festivals.
And again, the idea is saying, okay, well, you could say, let's have something good that night. Okay, I get that. I do get that. And if that's what you want to do, that's fine. I don't know that I'd necessarily be opposed to that. But what is it? In a sense, it's like, it's our version of that,
Right.
but they might say, well, no, it's an alternative. You choose that one or this one. Okay.
Right.
All right.
Well, I've heard of
Interesting.
churches before having fall parties on Halloween for their youth and stuff like that. And while it is in no way billed or advertised as a Halloween thing, kids will show up in costumes because it's on the day. And they just presume that it is a replacement for the day, just, that it's the same thing, just with a different name. So
And maybe
again,
there's some
I don't
merit.
want us to sound like we're trying to say there's anything wrong with dressing up for any reason.
Right. No, dress ups are fun,
but
honestly. I mean,
right,
I'm sure.
yeah,
Yes.
sure. But it's just we're not wanting to give credence to the day of Halloween at all because of 2 Corinthians 6:14 and 15. So I guess if we could conclude it, we're saying, yeah, if your church wants to evangelize that night, if you got 1,000 kids marching by, if you think that is an optimal form of evangelism, and you have the means and the resources to do that, I don't have a problem with somebody who wants to do that. Depending on how they do it,
Well, that's
so that they're
ultimately
not
not my
giving credence
call.
to the day.
They're an individual
Right.
believer. They're an independent church. You do what you feel like you ought to do between you and the Lord,
Right. Right. But yeah, the question of whether or not that is an effective form of evangelism is certainly a legitimate question to be asking. Is it better to just, in a sense, ignore it
Well,
and have your church service at the same time?
yeah, two things I want to say. One is I could see where a case could be made for providing an alternative. If you say in a similar way that, okay, you're having trouble, getting over smoking. Well, every time you feel the need to pull out a cigarette, you're going to get a Diet Pepsi. Or you know what? Okay. All right. So you've got to,
Yeah.
do I want you drinking, 32 gallons of pop a week? No, but man, if you're trying to get off of smoking, I say, hey, great, you got a replacement.
Yeah.
Well, if in some ways
Different scenario.
but if you have someone who says, well, I would go out and celebrate Halloween with my friends and walk around, on dark streets with my costume, asking strangers for candy, and you say, I want to give you a better alternative. Why don't you come to church and we'll have some snacks and some preaching and some games. Okay, if that's what you want to do, I'm not gonna. I necessarily think, okay, great. If that's what you want to do, not necessarily that's what I would do, because again, you're sort of highlighting the day. But in your mind, if you're providing the alternative to keep people from doing it in the traditional way and maybe being a safer and having a better influence. But my thought, see, what did you say a minute ago about? If giving candy, is seeing it as a form of evangelism. Yeah, I think there are better ways that are harder to be a good witness, and that is study your Bible, know what you believe, and have conversations with people. Then say, I'm gonna pass out some candy to kids so that I look nice, and I give them a tract in a very non-confrontational way, which they probably won't read, and
Right.
and I'm gonna go ahead and give that to them, and then I'll feel like I evangelized and that I did my part to reach the community. Well, in doing your part to reach the community, have you been like really diving into the Word of God to know Him and to interact with people and to invest in their lives and create relationships? Or did this just sort of like salve your conscience that I gave out bags of candy and I did my part? I think that could be.
If I could, push back a little bit on that,
Yes.
I don't think it's a waste of time to do that. There are scenarios, I think, in which passing out a bunch of tracts in a crowded area is actually not bad.
No,
While
right.
I don't,
Oh, yeah, I agree.
I agree with you that there are more effective ways to evangelize, even if you're only reaching one and you reach them better. It's better than reaching 1,000 with something they aren't going to read. But I think in some sense, by passing out tracts in a crowded area, like we did this at the 4th of July fireworks this past year, passed out hundreds of tracts in like 30 minutes.
Yeah,
And
yeah. Isn't that kind of fun?
oh, it's fun in its own way. I realized that pretty much everyone that I handed those to had no interest in them whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
It was at least an opportunity for them to take interest that they ignored.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that will hold them responsible on Judgment Day. And I'm okay with that, as weird as that sounds, because they had an opportunity. Though it might not have been a lengthy opportunity, they at least got the gospel in their hand. The Lord's going to hold them responsible for that because they could have read it.
Yeah, I think about, years ago we were in New York City, and I think it was at the subway, and you can like blow through tracks, which is great. You kind of feel like, wow, I'm really distributing a lot here. And so that can be good. And I remembered as you were talking, what the thing that triggered me earlier was the thought that if you say, well, people are being saved, so it's a good method. We have to be careful of that, because people, oh, well, look at this, quote unquote Christian rock concert, people were saved. So, you can't knock the music. No, that doesn't logically follow, because basically it's saying that if any good was done at all, then it validated the means. It's totally pragmatic.
Right.
So if I hand out, this candy and I kind of relate with them in this Halloween endeavor, and somebody gets saved, it shows what I was doing was good. No, it just means that God worked through that and his word actually lodged in someone's heart. But it doesn't mean that there's not a more effective way that you ought to be involved in. That maybe you ought to be looking at, how can I more effectively and powerfully affect my community through a strong witness. Doesn't mean just because somebody got saved. Now, if somebody gets saved, praise the Lord. But it doesn't, again, validate the means per se.
Right.
So
good. Well, I think we beat that one to death.
Yeah, thank you. And I anticipate that's there's going to be a variety of opinions on that. And so again, feel free to give us your feedback. reasontogetherpodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah. Well, with that being said, we are going to move over into the after show now. And if you're listening for the first time and you don't know what that is a kind of somewhat behind the curtain podcast in a way, in which we're a little more, I don't know how to describe it. It's paid content. Okay. That is a special podcast portion that is for our elite patrons, those that support this podcast financially at a particular level. If you're interested in hearing those discussions, and there's quite a few of them at this point, you can go over to patreon.com/reasontogether and sign up to be an elite patron. And that will give you several things. It'll give you access to the patron community message board. It'll give you a Reason Together t-shirt. And you'll also have access to the backlog of podcast after shows, in which we have all sorts of interesting discussions. Again, that's patreon.com/reasontogether. But that is all we have for you today.
Encouraging balance, developing perspective, and connecting faith to practice. This is Reason Together.